Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's Gigaom webinar, Why Cloud Exchanges Are the Next Big Thing. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks to our sponsor, BTI, for sponsoring today's webinar. My name is Barb Goldworm, and I'll be your moderator today. We're glad you've joined us. Let's go ahead and jump right in. We have a lot of great content and a great set of panelists today to talk about cloud exchanges and why cloud exchanges are the next big thing. We'll talk a little bit about what cloud exchanges and cloud connectivity services are all about. Let me just do a quick review of our content for today, make sure you folks are all in the right place, and give you a little bit of an idea of where we're going with our discussion today and why we think cloud exchanges are the next big thing. Everyone knows that enterprises today are relying significantly on the internet and in most cases on the public internet. But the issue that brings about is that the best effort internet kind of solutions that people have been using really aren't enough today to deliver the kinds of services for enterprise type applications that enterprises are looking for. So those days of best effort are really coming to an end. Enterprises are looking for predictability, availability, high performance, reliable cloud connectivity 24/7. And what's happening is that providers, hosting providers, colo providers, are realizing that things like space and power have really become a commodity. And in order to compete, they need to be able to deliver higher value kinds of things, like exchanges, cloud connectivity services, providing direct connectivity to all of the different types of providers that are out there, global carriers, ISPs, internet exchanges, CDN, content providers, storage vendors, and a myriad other types of connectivity. And in order to do that, they need to be able to provide that type of connectivity reliably for their organizations. And by doing that, those services will facilitate for them things like incremental revenue opportunities, attracting new customers, new customer types, improving product offerings, and boosting customer retention. So looking at things like Cloud Connect solutions will give colo providers the ability to offer enterprise customers what they're looking for: high bandwidth, low latency, connection services that bypass that best effort public internet and deliver what enterprises are looking for: superior throughput, reliability, security, better economics. So what we're going to discuss today is what all of this means. What is it? What is a cloud exchange? What does it mean to provide that kind of benefit of direct connectivity, delivering best performance, better cost per application? And we'll talk about some real-world use cases of what that looks like today and where we think it's going and what you should be delivering or looking for in delivering those types of services. So our agenda for today, I'll start us off with some introductions of our panelists. And then we'll kick off with a message from our sponsor. So the folks at BTI are sponsoring today's webinar. They'll talk to you a little bit about what they're doing and how they see this space. And then we'll jump into some conversation about the challenges of delivering cloud connectivity. What does that mean? What are the challenges that you're facing in trying to deliver those services? What are the kinds of requirements, cloud application and cloud business requirements that need to be addressed? What are the benefits of Cloud Connect services and Cloud exchanges? And then some of the features to be looking for in cloud exchanges and Cloud Connect services and providers of those services. And then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. You also have a question window available on your panel, and if you have questions as we go along, feel free to submit those. We may address them as a part of our conversation, or we may hold them until the Q&A at the end. So with that, let me do a quick introduction of our panelists. As I said, my name is Barb Goldworm. I'm the President and Chief Analyst of Focus and a frequent moderator for Gigaom, as well as writing white papers for Gigaom. Focus is an analyst firm. We focus on emerging and game-changing technologies, and clearly today's conversation is right at the heart of that. Our other panelist today, Robert Benefield, who is the CTO of Evolve Beyond. Robert, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Robert, are you there?
Oh, yes. Can you hear me?
Hi, Robert. Thanks.
Hi.
Thanks for being there. We also have Jelle Frank van der Stad, or also known as JF, who's Director of Business Development and Marketing for Interaction. JF, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here, and greetings from Amsterdam.
Greetings over there. And last but certainly not least, we have Eve Grillicus, who is speaking for us as our sponsor today. She's Director of Solutions Marketing for BTI. Eve, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for sponsoring.
Thank you, Barb. I really appreciate it. Great intro.
And with that, I'm going to turn it over, Eve, to you to tell our listeners a little bit about BTI and how you folks view this space.
Great. Thanks so much. If you could put the first slide up on BTI, I can tell you that a little bit about BTI. We're a global company with revenues that are fairly well split between content providers, co-location providers, and service providers worldwide. We're well supported by investors, and we're building a lot of the infrastructure for the cloud services today. Our Intelligent Cloud Connect platform delivers a packet optical infrastructure that really meets the density, power, and footprint requirements for a lot of the new networks that are being built today. That's fairly unusual compared to the standard optical platforms that are out there, in that we've got a pure optical platform that incorporates LSR switching as well as application awareness. So our customers that we can talk about examples-wise are Equinix, Rackspace, Interaction, and CyrusOne, which we most recently announced this week. We recently announced a relationship with Interaction, who Yeli is on the line with us here today. We've enabled cloud service or cloud connect solutions and services with the Interaction data centers in a couple of key areas in Europe, such as Frankfurt, Amsterdam, and London. If we can go to the next slide, it'll take us into a deeper dive of sort of what the Cloud Connect application really is. And I know that JF will talk a little bit more about Interaction and how they've established the service with our BTI Open SDN enabled platform. So what you see here, and what a lot of people are talking about with the Cloud Exchange or Cloud Connect, I think those terms are relatively interchangeable right now, is that it's a relatively new application. I mean, the historical way to access the cloud was really through the internet, which was fairly easy and cost effective. The real problem is that the applications that are using the cloud are increasingly more critical and requiring lower latency and occasionally more bandwidth. And the Cloud Exchange is one of the solutions to that. It may look somewhat simple here on this screen, but it's actually a little bit more complex than you would think. It starts with the self-service portal that you can see on the left here, and this is where customers themselves can sort of dynamically access their own power and bandwidth needs and start provisioning circuits, whether they be to a new cloud provider, a local ISP, or a global carrier, or to the storage hosting service that they're connected to. And the idea here is that for a co-location provider, it saves the colo provider a lot of money by enabling the customer to actually do the self-service portal themselves, and it allows the customer to feel that they're in far more control of their network and their cloud services than they ever were before. So how is this all done? It's done with APIs that connect the customer to what's inside the exchange, and it does whatever type of cross-connect really the provider wants. I mean, the real key here is that the connection runs through a single egress port for the customer, and an ingress port, a single ingress port that actually connects to multiple exchanges, as you can see on the right side, which can be global carriers to do peering with, the local ISPs to distribute content with, multiple enterprises for potential meet-me room, potential CDN players for caching, and any number of the new cloud providers that are providing DevOps capabilities, business services capabilities, or even more sort of just content distribution applications. And then you also have the storage and server hosting, which is another possibility. And I think the possibilities that will be in these exchanges may grow over time. So this type of connectivity right now is largely business-centric, but we're really looking at it being available not only across all of mobile devices, but it may actually incorporate a lot more consumer demands sometime in the near future. So that's really what I wanted to say about BTI and what we're doing, the support we've done, and what we've done with Interaction, who's a terrific customer of ours. So Barb, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thanks, Eve. That was actually a great introduction as well to this whole discussion we're having today. So I want to start off our conversation talking about the problems or the challenges in delivering cloud connectivity. Before we get into some of the solution alternatives and how they work, let's just chat a little bit about why this is so difficult. So our next slide, I've put up some of the issues that we see in terms of the challenges. Obviously, providers today are looking at ways to provide enterprise customers with better solutions, better connectivity, anything better than best effort internet of the past. And clearly, enterprises are looking for things like high bandwidth, low latency, better throughput, reliability, security, less costs, and what they're struggling with in order to address those things are the limitations of the public internet. So clearly, public internet has had performance issues, availability issues, lack of consistency, lack of predictability. So I want to chat a little bit about what you folks are seeing in terms of that, and then talk about the challenges in offering these kinds of improved Cloud Connect services. What makes that so difficult? And then a little bit more, and Eve, you've given us a great place to start, but a little bit more about kind of the role of a cloud exchange. What does that look like? How does that play out in the real world? And then I wanted to touch a little bit on the hype versus the reality. So, we always hear a lot of marketing hype about how this is the be-all and end-all solution. I wanted to talk a little bit about where we really are today, the hype versus reality. So we've got some folks with us today in JF and in Robert who are dealing with this really on the front lines. Eve is giving us a great intro to BTI. As we talk about the challenges, JF, you're really one of the companies that are out there dealing with this. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about your organization, about Interaction, and then talk a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of challenges, and then Robert and Eve, you guys can chime in as well. JF?
Yes, sure. Well, first of all, it's good to understand that Interaction is a leading carrier-neutral co-location provider in Europe. We currently have 37 data centers in 11 countries, all in Western Europe. And what some don't understand is that you can look at the European market as one market, but actually each country is a market in its own and has its own challenges. So looking at our customers, a lot of them primarily do local business and also want to use local clouds or want a local on and off ramp to the cloud. The very interesting line, I think, of this slide is that we're talking about the limitations of the public internet. And I think we tend to think that the internet is good enough for a lot of things. And primarily that comes from the fact that even if you look at the business market, small, medium enterprises, larger enterprises, they've been using the cloud primarily for experimentation, test and development, and not yet for large-scale business-critical applications. And I think we're at the start of the next phase in the growth of the cloud, where these enterprises are starting to use the internet and the cloud for these business-critical applications. And then they found out that there are limitations to the internet, and the internet isn't good enough for everything. And that's a very important driver, we think, why there is a high need for these type of connections and the use of cloud exchanges.
Great. So Robert, are you with us? Can you do a quick introduction and talk a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of challenges?
Sure. I work for a boutique consulting firm called Evolve Beyond, and we specialize in helping companies in really challenging industries improve their ability to understand and respond and innovate more quickly and effectively. And we do everything from product strategy to operational deployment and service management side. I'm much more on the back end, and I've worked in for telco companies and all of that. So a lot of what I go through and try to spend time on is how can you go through and work with these financial institutions or pharmaceutical medical companies or utilities or telcos or even government ministries, be able to go through and effectively service their business needs from a high availability, high reliability, secure data protection side of things. And a lot of what I'm seeing as I go through with this is there's a lot of companies out there that have really big challenges. I'll give three quick examples. One of them's probably one that most people would probably be aware of, which would be a big financial institution doing a lot of trading and handling a lot of important details. They have an awful lot of reporting requirements now that you have all of the new laws that have been put in place, and they've needed to find ways to be able to go through and burst out and be able to respond quickly and just in time to all these needs. So they've needed to go through and find out how can they go through and do this, and they've been really needing to rely upon cloud providers to be able to go through and allow them to be able to do this and allow them to be able to do it very, very dynamically. And dynamically, I'm not talking like, oh, we go through and provision something for a few months. I'm talking about hours. And so they want to burst out and do what they need to do and bring it back, and they want to be able to do it quickly, safely, and securely. And going through and utilizing the public internet or even leased lines, it just isn't reliable enough and isn't secure enough. And so they've really needed to go through and find better ways to be able to handle this. Another good example is a big manufacturer, one that I won't name, but everyone's heard of, and they have a really unique problem. Where they have lots and lots of devices that are out in the market that are basically the big businesses, and they need to monitor and collect information both for themselves as well as for their customers to be able to go through and utilize. And they integrate quite heavily into Microsoft Azure and those types of services to be able to go through and provide a lot of these capabilities. And as well as they have a fairly sizable internal hosted co-located footprint, and they need to be able to go through and have very, very reliable links between themselves and the cloud providers, and even down to customers, to be able to go through and really make sure that they're able to provide these things just in time, and that they're able to meet any sort of regulatory or data protection laws. And then the third one, which is actually also interesting, is a large consumer products company that I've done things with, and they will have big regional campaigns where they want to go through and launch things out to market, and some of it will be experimental, some of it may be tied around some big sporting event or something like that. They want to be able to go through provision, burst, break down, and extract dynamically all of the information that they want to collect behind all this stuff. Those are things that traditionally working with a co-location provider or a traditional telco or something like that was actually really slow and really expensive. And a lot of the things that are now coming out with cloud as well as cloud exchange types of technologies are allowing them to have whole new options for being able to go through and deal with this. So, and that's a lot of what I'm seeing today.
I think that's a great explanation, and in fact is probably a good segue into our next section, where we want to drill down a little bit even more in terms of what are the application and business requirements for cloud. So, and I think we'll sort of weave these two conversations together. We've talked a bit about the role of the cloud exchange and how that ties in. I want to kind of take that idea of hype versus reality and weave that in a little bit more into our next conversation as well. But let's drill down a little now further into application and business requirements. And our next slide poses some specifics on that. So clearly, the enterprises are relying on the cloud and have a lot of the types of requirements, Robert, that you just gave in a couple of examples, and I'll be interested in hearing more of those now, both from JS and from Eve. Clearly, we're looking at connectivity to a lot of different types of providers, and Robert, you've given some examples of that. Requirements around predictability and high-performance connectivity and so forth. A lot of folks now getting into things like hybrid clouds, where they're doing some private and some public, or some combination of public clouds as well as private, driving additional requirements for things like business continuity, disaster recovery, backup, even things like sandbox development for things that are then going to move into one of the other potential clouds. So how does that play out, and what kinds of requirements is that driving? And then obviously one of the big drivers for cloud in general is the fact that business requirements are changing so quickly, and that's driving a lot of things like the need for dynamic bandwidth and the need for things like cloud bursting. We've been talking about cloud bursting since the beginning of cloud. Let's talk a little bit about how that plays out and the requirements that drives, and again, hype versus reality. Where are we today? What does that really mean for providers trying to deliver that type of service? And then lastly, what we're seeing is also, in terms of trending, a lot of organizations now trying to move more towards things like on-demand services and self-service. Eve, you talked a little bit about self-service portal. Specifically, I want to tie that in terms of the requirements that you guys are seeing from businesses, and how can you deliver that? So, Eve, do you want to weigh in a little bit? We haven't heard from you. We've heard some initial thoughts from Robert and JF.
Sure. I think there are kind of two major trends that we're seeing overall today. One trend I think most people recognize, which is that the movement of getting content closer to the eyeballs of the network, i.e. the consumers in the network. That's driving more content into the metro to lower the latency so that people can get to the content faster, whether it's cached on the edge or not. And that sort of benefits everybody. And that's being done with the internet exchanges all over Europe. So content is getting closer and closer, which is basically causing a lot of infrastructure build to happen in the metro area. BTI has been very successful in this area because we've known some of the content providers for years, and they tend to leverage off of each other, and so we've been very lucky to have been a good customer of these guys and helped in this infrastructure build out. The other trend, which I think is a little less obvious, but you mentioned here, and it's really along the self-service side, is that the cloud computing has sort of broken the barrier on this. If you think back to the sort of unbundling of the access content, triple play isn't such a great thing anymore. User-defined demand, usage-based models a la, the AWS pricing where, basically a DevOps pays for, the time that they use, and that's it, and they don't have to pay a regular monthly bill that they may or may not be using, is really where the market is heading. So what's going to happen, and where there's some challenges here, is that the billing and the management of all of this really has to follow. No one's going to pay for a full cloud exchange package. What they're going to want to pay for is what they use, and not one bit more of that. So I think that sort of trend in itself is going to be a bit of a challenge because we're going to have to get it straight, and the revenues or the margins on usage base could be very good, but it really sort of depends. So we're going to have to get clever about how we add value to that in, across the infrastructure, inside the co-location provider, and also with the content providers.
Go ahead.
Yeah, JF here. If I may add to that, for us, the whole self-service and the portal that we use is a very important part of our service delivery, and it links directly into what Robert described in the examples, because what we see in the market is that a lot of these enterprises that have those demands look at their trusted IT supplier to provide those services for them. And that's where we see a very important demand for cloud exchanges, is service providers, systems integrators that basically want to aggregate the demand for their customers into a single cloud, or link together multiple clouds for a single customer, and to service that demand, to basically provide those customers a tool to enable that for their end users. This is a very important requirement to be able to deliver cloud exchange services.
Yeah, I would also go through and agree. I would say that there's not just all that, but there's also another requirement, which is really in and around the reporting side of things, really being able to go through and understand what's going on. Yes, definitely being able to have the self-service aspect of being able to go through and get things quickly. I mean, for instance, one of the examples I gave, which is actually kind of interesting, because I think a lot of people think, well, cloud exchange, if I'm a co-location provider, does that mean that I'm going to lose business because they're going to go and burst away from me and shuffle things away? And actually, what I'm finding is that how a lot of businesses are actually utilizing this is, and I'll use a electricity example. There's kind of a baseband. There's of compute and storage and all those various different types of services that people are going through and utilizing, and they'll put those things within a colo provider that allows them to be able to burst out for those extra special things that might be one-offs, or might be things that they need to go through and tie to, say, a Microsoft, that only Microsoft can actually go through and provide. And so being able to have a low barrier, pay per use, able to go through and track, very predictable, high performance way of being able to do this is incredibly important.
What about things like business continuity, disaster recovery? Are you seeing folks doing much in that space? Is that driving requirements as well?
Definitely, disaster recovery is one of the main cases we see popping up as a reason to explore the use of these private connections into the big public clouds like Azure or AWS or SoftLayer.
Okay, great. All right, so let's move on, and we've sort of led up to this next area. We've talked about the requirements and the challenges. Let's talk about now what the actual benefits are. And I want to talk about this in two flavors, and I've outlined that on our next slide. I want to look at first the benefits from an enterprise perspective of what benefits can an enterprise gain by moving to a colo site that has a Cloud Connect platform, Cloud Exchange, Cloud Connect services. And I've listed again some of the things that we've talked a little bit about in terms of bandwidth, low latency, getting around the internet, throughput, reliability, offloading some things to the providers. I want to talk a little bit about cost. And then let's talk about the provider side. So what are the benefits that providers can gain? Things like incremental revenue, new customer types, improving product offerings, boosting customer retention. And I'd like to hear a little bit, JF, from you on what you've actually already seen in those regards. So let's talk first a little bit about the enterprise side. Who wants to kick us off?
Well, I would like to kick it off. I mean, the reasons you mentioned on the slide, those are the basic reasons for enterprises to put their business critical application, to be able to put their business critical applications in the cloud. Now we know there's a lot of research out there that describes all the barriers for enterprises to move their applications to the cloud. And basically what we have seen is that the public cloud's being used for applications and workloads that fit perfectly well in the cloud. So there's a next wave coming of how can these organizations benefit from cloud with their large business critical applications, time sensitive applications, basically all the applications that haven't been moved to the cloud for a number of reasons. And the ability to, on one side, directly access large public clouds and benefit from the value of a cloud exchange breaks down those barriers for these enterprises to start using public cloud for their business critical applications. And those can be a variety of scenarios. It could relate to big data. It could relate to application renewal. There's a whole variation of applications that's out there.
Yeah, I'd like to add to some of that stuff. I think there's also another element that I see certainly around this as well, which is being able to go through and connect up in a safe and secure way all of your, whether you call them legacy or traditional or what have you, services that you go through and you might have be providing internally. Being able to connect those up with newer, faster, more cloud-like technologies and capabilities that are out there allow businesses to reduce a lot of the internal friction that exists, and being able to go through and figure out how are you going to go through and do that, how are you going to be able to do it where you're able to respond quickly, how are you able to do it where you're able to have fine-grained controls, how are you going to be able to do that so that you're able to still have the governance aspects, but not have necessarily the friction that you have from the traditional internal IT problems. I think that what I've seen is that the Cloud Connect services are allowing businesses to be able to go through and do just that.
I completely agree, Robert. I think that enterprises today sometimes don't realize that some of their engineering groups, for instance, are using the cloud without their knowledge and are just expensing it to their own departments. When they start initiating sort of the outsource model, everything that was previously expensed can actually now be tracked in a method where bandwidth that's used by marketing or finance or DevOps can actually be tracked by the IT departments and be utilized and analyzed. Not to mention the fact that there's actually more cloud vendors located in co-location sites or service provider sites, and that offers the connectivity and backups that can actually be improved. This way you actually have more options to replace a cloud provider and jump to another one or shift another department to another cloud provider very easily. That's the whole sort of benefits that come behind this, is that it's not necessarily a sticky environment that you previously had with, say, a service provider. You can adjust accordingly to what your needs are. And I don't think that could have been done before the cloud exchange. I think the providers benefit on a couple of fronts. I mean, they get the cloud providers wanting to get close to sort of their marquee customers, and then they add more enterprise customers the more content and cloud offerings they have. So it's not so much chicken and egg, it's actually just more of a growth pattern in general. And I also think it's a huge opportunity when you look at things like Mobile World Congress, which I think a lot of people are familiar with. It's a mobility conference, and yet nobody can seem to use their smartphones there. that's a huge opportunity for service providers or a co-location provider based on their access and location to leverage that and provide extra bandwidth on an as-needed basis. So I think that we haven't even really touched on some of the potential possibilities that are going to be enabled by this whole cloud exchange.
And I want to ask you a question in a minute, Jeff, but I want to go back, Eve, to something that you said, which I think was a great point. You were talking about the fact that a lot of IT organizations don't even know some of the things that are going on, that shadow IT that's happened within the organization of people going off on the side and doing credit card swipes for things, and the fact that this can make a huge difference in that regard by providing cloud exchange and giving kind of central IT the ability to control who goes where. And I wanted to come back to the question of cost, because managing that and providing a better way to do all of that can have significant ramifications on cost, can't it, to the organizations, to the enterprises themselves?
Well, absolutely, absolutely. And, a quick example of that is sometimes we look at some of our cloud providers and we say, have you looked at what it's like to build your own network versus using leased lines? And quickly they realize that it's far cheaper to build out their own network. But what's happened is that inside the organization, there are taxes that they're paying to the service providers for those lease lines that are not incorporated with the actual cost of the lease line. So in other words, the CFO is paying a bill of, could be hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, depending on how many data centers are in any given metro area, that are not included in the cost of the 10 gig waves. And so that sort of mismatch of not understanding what the full cost of leasing waves from a service provider standpoint is pretty critical, and that goes away when you build your own network. It's the same thing here. I think if you consolidate what you're doing with the cloud, then you can realize how much the DevOps is utilizing it. Maybe marketing or finance is bursting way too much. You can go to them and say, why are you doing this? Is there a way that we can take a look at this and be more cost effective? I mean, it basically is going to provide far more visibility to the IT player for the type of stuff that they're looking for to control their costs.
Right. And oftentimes a better service for less cost than what they were paying before.
Exactly. This is the sort of move out of the house syndrome. As all of the kids are gone, you have this whole house, you're paying, you're still paying for it. It doesn't make sense. The same thing with the data centers. As data centers get offloaded, more and more to the cloud, what ends up being just critical takes up the whole data center. Now it doesn't make sense anymore. So I think the migration to the cloud, and especially into the co-location spaces, is going to happen over a period of time, because people are going to realize, I had 2 floors for my data center. I've now outsourced, 3/4 of it. Why am I paying for all this real estate when I can get real estate much cheaper and power much cheaper with the co-location provider?
So JF, you've actually gone through this as a provider. Can you talk a little bit about what your experience was as you moved into this?
Yes, well, for basically there are 2 points of view. So the first one is obviously from as a co-location provider, and we want to add value to our enterprise customers, and our Cloud Connect solution enables us to provide those on and off ramps to the big public clouds. It's a technical solution for us to provide them with the right solution and to provide them with a service. But there's a second point of view, because the enterprise, the end users, work with the service providers and the system integrators. They are really connected to the technology that's provided by some of the big public cloud providers. Take, for example, Microsoft and IBM. They have a whole large network of channel and service providers that use that technology and integrate that for the enterprises. So it's also a service from us to them to enable that for their end users.
Okay. Great. So let's move on to our last section and talk a little bit about for the folks that are looking at now how to gain some of the benefits that we've just described. What are the features to be looking for from a cloud exchange or Cloud Connect services and providers? So our next slide I've put up to a certain extent kind of a standard list, but customized a little bit for this environment. What are the features businesses should look for in a colo provider in terms of Cloud Connect? Are some of these the top things, the most important things? Is it kind of you need all of this for this to be functional? What are you hearing from organizations? And Jeff, maybe you're a good place to start with this. What are you hearing from organizations when they come to you? Are these the requirements that you're getting?
Well, one of the most important ones that we see is the fact that we can deliver a service guarantee. We all know that the internet doesn't have an SLA, and if you're talking about business critical applications, enterprises are looking for a service level agreement, and it's often that simple.
Well, I wish it were that simple. maybe you guys make it that simple. Of course, I think the key is that it's not simple to provide, but that's clearly what everyone is looking for.
Well, it obviously takes away one of the most important barriers for enterprises to consider an alternative way to connect to the cloud. Right.
Robert, I think you mentioned earlier something about reporting. Can you kind of dive a little bit deeper, talk a little bit more about kind of the analytics and reporting requirement?
Yeah, so and keep in mind a lot of the big companies out there, especially now that we've had like you not only have Sarbanes-Oxley, but you have all of the various different financial reporting and data protection laws and all kinds of stuff that's going on. You have an awful lot of organizations that have to go through and figure out ways to be able to understand and report on where services are running, who's using them, how much is being used, and this is even in places like I give a really good example on medical side of things. A lot of people don't really think about the fact that more and more hospitals, more and more healthcare providers are having to go through and provide services that are connected. And they need to report these things out to be able to go through and deal with regulatory requirements that they have either within the United States or in the EU or in other jurisdictions. So really being able to have a good understanding of what's going on, really being able to do it in a fast and easy way, and to be able to go through and also be able to do it authoritatively in a way that you couldn't do in a more traditional network side of things, where you go, yep, I have a line that goes from here to there, but I can't really tell you exactly how it's being used or what's going through and being moved around on it, or what's on the other end, or where things are going, or all that. That's really important.
And I agree with you, Robert. I think the analytics are so important for the reporting and the visibility of who is doing it, so that you can go back and make those modifications. I think the granularity in reporting and the whole billing is really key. I think with the emphasis on this sort of usage-based model and cloud bursting, the billing is going to really have to reflect who and when and what bandwidth was used and was it really needed. I think these features are relatively checklist requirements. Some are harder to provide than others, but I think that they're a very, very good list of. I don't think anything's not on here, but nothing's particularly easy either. I think as with anybody out there, BTI included is an packet optical player. We have to differentiate ourselves as not just being another optical player. We have to show that we have additional value with our packet capability and our analytics and application awareness. In the same vein, a co-location or service provider or a cloud provider is going to have to show that they can provide additional value in this competitive environment as well. I mean, whether it's a geographically dispersed network, it could be they have the fastest provisioning, they could be they're the easiest to use, it could be the vastness of the exchange inhabitants, in other words, that they have more content providers than anyone else. It's kind of hard to tell how complicated this could be or not be.
That's a great point, and that also leads me to another question, Eve. And Robert, you mentioned this sort of in a couple of ways. How does this play out in terms of vertical spaces versus horizontal? So is there specialization in terms of the connectivity is someone specializing in financial markets or any particular vertical spaces? Are you seeing that happening?
I think I think certainly the financials were first to jump on building their own networks and doing some outsourcing. Healthcare is certainly a very high bandwidth market, and oil and gas for all of their transaction-based and analysis are also looking at any type of data center that can supply them exactly what they need. And it could be the inclusion of servers to do additional analysis.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jim. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and yeah, I guess what I'm seeing is having worked on the financial industry and having actually had to build all of those networks by hand before any of this stuff existed. They definitely have latched onto this, and they're much more sensitive to things like speed and uptime and availability and low latency and all that, because microseconds actually matter when you're talking about the financial side of things. When you're talking about healthcare, you're talking about moving an awful lot of data very, very securely in a way of being able to report these things back. Then you have some of the manufacturing and consumer products, and even some of the internet service provider types that are really looking at how can I be much more dynamic and provide new services quickly, and how can I go through and tie those things back to leverage a lot of the capabilities I have internally, such that I'm able to have a lot less friction within it. So all very, and also some of the things that Eve and Jeff have mentioned, and how can I go through and understand more of what's going on and reduce my costs along the way, so that I don't have that big data center that's sitting dark, that's not doing anything for my disaster recovery, that I don't have all these floors of old servers from the late 90s or early 2000s that are kicking around that I have difficulty really doing things with. So cloud exchanges definitely are able to help in all those various different cases.
So I want to come back to the question we asked early on and sort of sum up where we are with all of this today. In terms of cloud exchanges, clearly they provide benefits. They address a lot of the issues that we've been discussing, and we've talked about the things people should be looking for in a cloud exchange. Is it hype or is it reality? How real are cloud exchanges today? Are there lots of them out there? Are we in the very early days? Are there some that are providing really advanced capabilities, but most are just connecting to maybe a couple of different providers? What do you think the state of the world is today around cloud exchanges?
I could jump in first here. It's a great question. I mean, our market right now, the sort of networking market that we're seeing, I think is going through the fastest changes I have ever seen in the industry. And that typically reflects the fact that the marketing usually is a little bit ahead of some of the implementations. And I think it's fair to say that, but I think there have been some providers, service providers, and co-location providers that have looked into the cloud exchange, examined it, and decided that they want to take a step back and remain just space and power providers and not do anything else. The others, I think, are looking at adopting more of the services like Cloud Connect that doesn't necessarily put them in a non-carrier neutral situation, and know that they pretty much have to do it. Being just a co-location provider or just a service provider is not going to really cut it, I think, in the next 3 to 5 years. I think service providers and co-location providers are going to have to take those steps to differentiate themselves and offer more value to be competitive. And the ones who are taking a step back are probably making the wrong decision there. So I do think that while the market is working quickly, we are a little bit ahead of this, but everybody is looking at this and making the decision of how much to invest in it, and Interaction is definitely well along in deploying the whole Cloud Connect.
Yeah, and I'd have to say that Cloud Exchange today is definitely a reality. But it's still in early days. If you look at what the cloud providers are doing, Amazon Direct Connect has been around for a couple of years, but only earlier this year, Microsoft announced ExpressRoute, later followed by SoftLayer announcing Direct Link, and recently Google announced their way of offering direct connectivity into their platform. Now, looking at this from the European perspective, these cloud exchanges, these on and off ramps, they aren't available in every country and on every data center yet. So that's a clear signal that is starting. Companies are looking for their first use cases. But I do expect that within the next 12 to 18 months, we will see a lot more growth, a lot more announcements, and hopefully a lot more case studies that prove that this is the way for enterprises to build their new IT environment.
Yeah, I would also agree. I would say we're definitely in the early days of this. From all the things that I'm seeing, there are a lot of companies out there that have really nasty problems that Cloud Connect can help them with. There have been some that have started to move down that way. As Eve has said, there are some providers that are out there that are still sitting back because it is early days, and especially when you go through and look at both co-location and connectivity, you do have some fairly conservative players that are out there. Though conversely, having been at some of those players, they're shaking a bit. They don't want to just be dumb plumbing or ping and power in space with stuff, and Cloud Exchange and those abilities are services that can really differentiate. So there are companies that are starting to go at it. I do think it is probably going to be the next, I would say, yeah, probably 18 to 24 months that you're going to see. You're going to start to see some much bigger use cases coming out there and being public around this. And I think that that's going to cause a lot of stir around the whole industry.
All right, great. With that, I'm going to move us along. We've gotten some good questions coming in. Let's move to the Q&A section, and I'll remind our listeners that you have the ability to submit questions if you haven't already. I've gotten a couple, so I'm going to go ahead and take this first one. Where can I find the service provider partners that are available with BTI? And kind of along with that, Eve, so this one's for you. Could you highlight what cloud providers are available at your colo sites?
Well, we're not a service provider or a co-location provider. We provide the infrastructure for that. you can basically go to btisystems.com, and if you look under resources, you'll find multiple case studies with our service provider customers, our co-location provider customers. There's a case study with Rackspace. There's a case study that's posted with Interaction where we talk about how exactly we've helped them enable the cloud services. We are fairly well integrated with the Tier 1 service providers in North America. As I said, we've announced Cyrus One, so we're helping them deploy sort of the whole Cloud Connect, cloud bursting as well. I hope that's a help, not to make sure we understand that we're not actually, we're providing the infrastructure to help the services.
Okay, great. And let's see, I've got another one, JF. This one is for you. How is the Cloud Exchange working for Interaction? So I think they're looking for some kind of real-world experience there from you.
Well, that question can be answered in many different ways. I think high level, most important thing is that we connect cloud providers. Those can be the well-known global ones or some local ones that are, well, may not be well known by everyone, but certainly within a country have a large customer base. And on the other side, there is the enterprise or the service providers that use those cloud platforms. So it connects them from two sides, and basically it extends the VLAN offering that the cloud provider is offering all the way into the environment that an enterprise or a service provider has within our data center. I hope that answers the question.
I think I was reading that a little bit differently. Not how does it work, but how is it working for you?
It's working great. As we said, we're in the early days. We have launched our Cloud Connect product in London, Amsterdam, and Frankfurt, and we're currently onboarding our cloud providers and customers.
And I guess you're the proof that it actually can be done and can be delivered and make life better for customers that are using it through you.
Exactly.
So you're our success story for the day, JF.
Yeah. No, and I mean it's also like I said earlier, this market is still very inefficient, and I will shortly give an example. If you, for example, look at the London market, there's one location where you have Amazon's Direct Connect that links into their availability zone in Dublin, and what we've done with Cloud Connect is that we enabled that for our customer base in London. And one of the things that we saw that there was a high need for a redundant solution, so not just one connection into the London Direct Connect, but also redundantly into the other location in Dublin. So we enabled that as well with our Cloud Connect solution, and basically not only enabling Direct Connect for customers in our London data center, but adding value, making that a redundant solution.
Great. Well, I think this has been a very interesting conversation. Hopefully we've helped people understand some of the benefits, some of what's going on in terms of Cloud Connect services and cloud exchanges, the benefits that can be offered, and why it's important, if you haven't looked into this yet, why we think this is the next best thing. Clearly the problems of relying on the public internet are obvious to everyone at this point who has a computer. I think this is talking about some of the ways that we can make this better, and how we can make it better for enterprises, and how this can make it better for providers and becoming more competitive in delivering the kinds of services they need to keep their current customers and grow their customer base further going forward. So I want to thank our audience today for listening. I hope this has been helpful for you. There are a couple questions now coming in, but I'm afraid we're out of time. So we will try to get those answers to you after the webinar. And I want to thank our panelists, Robert and JF, for joining us and sharing your experiences. And Eve, thank you obviously for joining us as well today, and thank you for your sponsorship. I hope everyone has enjoyed this conversation, and good luck as you go and figure out the role that cloud exchanges can play in your environment, and we wish you success in doing so. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, JF.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barb.
Thanks, everyone.